Hello and welcome to Property Question Time. I'm Stephen Galpin and this is a show where you can have your property related questions answered by our team of property experts. And joining me today is David Galman, property consultant and previously director of Galliard Homes. Welcome, David.
Hi, Stephen.
And joining David is Chris Barry, business development director of Thomas Legal. Welcome to you.
Thanks for having you.
Okay, Chris, you're going first. Here's a question relating to the new legislation coming through, if it ever does. That is. How are lenders reacting to the new renters reform legislation, given that it may make vacant possession of repossessions from landlords more difficult or more complicated?
Yeah, lenders are taking a really interesting view on a number of matters. There's clearly the ongoing cases that they're sort of starting to get their head around slightly, but also there are already vacant properties that they're looking at and trying to decide whether to lend on them, which is really interesting. But financial hardship, of course, is one of the clauses that is meaning that it could become easier for them in the future.
Okay, well, if I can just put something to you on that, I gave some thought to this question, and let's just say I'm a tenant, and let's say I'm fairly savvy. You're the lender, and you've told me you're going to repossess the property. I'm hardly likely to want to go chasing round trying to get you vacant possession with my tenant gone. So therefore, if I was the tenant, I'd want to stay put. I'd say, look, I've lost my landlord, you've repossessed the property, you're now the bank, you now own the property, so there's no way you can tell me that you're financially suffering hardship, nor do you want to put one of your close relations in the property, which are, I think, the two grounds of possession now. So are the banks going to end up with sitting tenants?
Yeah, absolutely. I think they might. And one of the issues that we're seeing right now that's happening quite a lot is that the new potential buyers coming along to buy the property, whether off the bank or an existing landlord that's struggling to sell, and the valuer, the bank is saying, in theory, we will lend on this to Mr. New Buyer, but the valuer is going around and saying that they're putting a nil value on it. And what that means is that effectively they're saying, look, if the new buyer comes along and the new bank is exposed to this debt, if they need to repossess again under very legitimate grounds, they're going to find that either they need to drop the price so significantly that it probably becomes into negative equity and they need to crystallize a loss, or it hangs around on the market for so long that they can never sell it. So I don't necessarily think that these properties will have a nil value, but it is just a way of lenders taking a step back and thinking, we don't want exposure to this stuff. And the comment they're using is that there's lack of investor appetite.
Well, I suppose you're going to have to be a fairly brave buyer to take on something with a sitting tenant in there. You know, obviously in this kind of scenario, a tenant that's argued his position, so you've not got some kind of pushover as a fallback. So you've got a tenant there saying, no, I'm stuck here, I'm here. You as a purchaser don't really know his track record. It might in fact be his track record that's caused the difficulty with the landlord in the first place. So it's going to be quite hard to finance, isn't it?
Yeah, absolutely will do. And as the legislation goes on and starts to form and we start to understand more about it, lenders typically, especially the big banks and especially the ones that are state-owned, are under tremendous pressure to do the right thing by the public. So that, I think, is the only probably promising sign to make sure that people are doing the right thing for the right
The only
people.
trouble is that usually doing the right thing means being totally risk averse, doesn't it?
Absolutely, yeah. And it stifles commercial.
That's a difficulty. Any comment on this, David?
I think the whole renters reform bill is a potential problem for every facet of the market, not just the lenders, but landlords definitely. And I think you made the comment, banks are saying that investors are very shy at the moment. Well, they definitely are, because they can't see the returns. And if they do see a return, they're scared of the renters reform bill and what it might do.
And the return is getting smaller, but the risk is getting higher.
Correct,
for the landlords.
Yes. I mean, it does lead us, doesn't it? This sort of, the government's ethos at the moment is to try and get all the sort of buy-to-let properties with the institutional landlords. And I suppose people who can probably cope on a more commercial basis with all the intricacies of the new legislation rather than the individual, because it's quite a dangerous world now, isn't it? And as you say, the profits have come down and down and down, and it's quite a touchy game now.
I don't know anyone that actually wants to own a single, just a single unit buy-to-let unit at the moment. They're just not in the market for that. People that I've known for a number of years are kind of saying, I'm done with it. It's too difficult. It doesn't make any money. The government, and it was the previous government that really started the whole process with trying to get everyone to go PRS.
There's a lot of talk at the moment about a tremendous wealth transfer from the smaller landlord who perhaps owns 2 or 3 as maybe part of their pension pot to corporate institutions. And I think that's a really worrying sign for the future, because once some of these big houses own a large proportion of a certain area, they can pretty much charge what they want on the rental side.
Well, yes, but I think the more dangerous situation is the fact that these big institutions will take just purely commercial decisions at various points in their strategy, and it might just be that they find better investments, perhaps commercial property rather than residential property or whatever, and they're just out. And then we're back to a shortage of properties, which up go the rents again and make it even more difficult. I think for young people at the moment, it's terribly difficult to decide whether it's worthwhile to buy or to rent. I'm not sure there's that much difference in cost these days, is there?
No, there isn't. Rents are still rising, probably more than property values. And the way the sort of supply and demand position right now is so unbalanced, there is a potential that house prices might start to come down a bit. And wage rises over the past 12 months have outstripped the rise of house prices. So there is a position right now where a first-time buyer could find a property more affordable than they could have done back in 2005 to buy. Now to rent, it's a completely different picture. Rents have become very unaffordable for most.
But actually, some of the qualifications needed to rent are just as stringent as they
Yeah,
are
absolutely.
to buy, aren't they?
Yeah.
Quite difficult. All right, thank you for that. So, David, the majority of developers, particularly in the London region, have historically retained the freehold of their developments to receive ground rents, or perhaps later to sell off the ground rent investment. However, with new ground rents being limited to peppercorn under the new legislation, will developers now see the retention of a freehold as a liability rather than an income-producing asset?
Well, without killing the question and the answer, in short, yes.
Right, okay. I need a bit more from you.
I'm sure you do. I mean, and I've seen it over the past few years whereby house builders and developers are certainly not hanging on to their freeholds because there is no value in doing so. They are a potential liability. You know, they used to be able to earn, the managing agents would earn out of various different commissions on insurance and other add-ons that made owning a freehold a valuable asset. Now, owning a freehold with zero income on it from the ground rents just produces lots and lots of letters, lots and lots of emails, and you get nothing in return for it.
Yeah, well, I mean, I can remember, I think probably 10 years ago, I was looking at negotiating something down the road here, and I think we're looking at 11 times the ground rent income, you know, so it was quite steamy numbers to sell it off.
It went higher than that for some time. There was, you know, institutions paying 14s and 15 multiples on some of the more valuable assets. I wonder what they're going to do with those now. I'm a little bit, I don't understand how there can't be a 2-tier market in this. I mean, everything else is 2-tier today, but how there can't be a 2-tier market in properties with ground rents.
Well, there will be, won't there?
And
there'll be one with peppercorn and one with full ground rent.
And there are still a number of lenders, there are a number of buildings out there that have a ground rent that doesn't work for certain lenders, and they're trapped in those. So they're having to buy their way out with their landlords.
Yeah, I think because the other danger that I see, I've experienced this in quite big blocks where there's perhaps 400, 500, 600 apartments. People want to buy the freehold. Really? I think it's a dangerous game in the world. I mean, one, residents are not qualified property professionals in the main, and therefore they're walking into a very dangerous and litigious world if they're not very, very careful. And I just can't think why anybody would want to do it. And I was talking to somebody the other day, and I mean, they said, oh, well, we could change the lease to this, we could change the lease to that, we could do this. I said, now, just bear in mind, every change of that lease is a deed of variation for probably 1,000 people. you know, and that's on your side and on their side. And believe you me, if you want to make the change, you'll be the one that's having to pay the bill. And even on a sort of basic deed of variation, it's probably going to be what, £600 or £700 on each side easily.
Yeah, 1,500. Yeah.
Yeah. So it's really quite a dangerous game, isn't it? And I see that as quite a big danger in the market, with people getting the wrong idea about sort of
being in charge of their
being
own
in
destiny.
charge, yeah.
I think if you've got a small block of 15 or 20 flats and half the people in there are retired, semi-retired, perfect. The perfect opportunity for the busybodies to own the block. 200, 300, 400 people is impossible to manage, and they would have to give it to a managing agent anyway.
Yes. But of course, that's how you make your living. Okay. All right. Well, thank you for that, gents. That's all we've got time for in this half of the show. So join me again after the break when I'll be asking David and Chris more of your questions. Hello and welcome back to part 2 of Property Question Time with David Galman and Chris Barry. Welcome back, guys. Chris, your second question. Given that legislation in respect of ground rents is going to significantly change and not be applied retrospectively, will this not create a two-tier charging regime in multi-unit developments, new and old, i.e. some with peppercorn rents and others with full ground rents, as actually David brought up in the last conversation? But it's going to be a problem, isn't it?
Yeah, massive problem. So that's coming. There will be a position very shortly where new developments are going up with zero, and there might be a block right next door with an old style lease with significant ground rent, and some of them doubling ground rents. The differential right now is actually happening in units already that are existing. So there was a bill that was passed in February to implement that any new lease, so any extension of a lease, so anybody that's owned a lease for a while, gets close to maybe 80 years, decides to extend that back up, immediately goes to peppercorn. So you can have a unit in a block that's peppercorn. You can have the opposite the corridor, another unit that is full ground rent. So if you've got both on the market at the same time, you can pretty much tell where the buyer is going to go.
Yeah, but I mean, one of the things here, the government say, well, okay, we're looking at a formula for those with full ground rents to be able to buy their way out of that with a landlord. So I mean, I appreciate that can get regulated so that it doesn't become, what shall we say, extreme or restrictive. But you know, I'm a long leaseholder, and if somebody said to me, oh well, yeah, you can get rid of your ground rent, but you've got to find another £20,000-30,000 or something, I'd struggle. And a lot of people are living on the line as far as their housing costs are concerned. I'd worry that, again, landlords could use that as a sort of reason not to give up the ground rents if the government calculation isn't attractive enough to them.
So those people in leasehold houses have had the ability to buy the freehold back off the developer, and that was capped. So there was
what sort of level was it capped at? Do you know?
It was actually very reasonable in my opinion. It was £500.
Oh.
Across certain developments with certain developers. So obviously not central London, and we're yet to know what that calculation might be for leaseholds in central London. But when we do, I would fully expect it to have a cap.
I mean, sort of figures I'm hearing, sort of £20,000-30,000. Do you think that's right?
It's a very different world, isn't it? I mean, that's not uncommon for a premium to extend the lease, so it would make sense.
I mean, what would a lender's view be if you've got a sort of pretty full mortgage and you went along and said, can I have another 20,000-30,000 pound to get rid of my ground rent? What would they say?
Yeah, that happens a lot when people want to extend their lease. People get close to 80 years, they then tend to borrow money to be able to pay the premium to extend their lease back up to 125. And lenders are quite comfortable with that, providing there's significant evidence to show that the property value is increasing by the same or more. So if there is evidence to suggest having a peppercorn ground rent extends the value by X, and that ties in with the premium amount, which you would think and hope that the calculation does add up, then there's no reason why a lender should.
But that's all about
expose
values,
themselves.
isn't it?
It is, absolutely.
Which we may
Yeah.
talk about later. I mean, I said to him one day, I said, "Oh, I live in quite an expensive flat down here." He said, "No, you used to." It's quite reasonable
Love
now. Yeah. I didn't go home feeling very good about that, David. No, so there we are. No, well, it's going to be quite complex, isn't it? All of this, and where I see the complexity come is where you do get the big buildings with 200, 300, 400, 500 flats, and you'll have such a diverse range of views of the tenants, won't you? Some want to do it, some won't want to do it, some will think it's unfair, some will think it's the best thing since sliced bread. I don't know where we're going to go with this.
There's going to have to be some mandatory intervention to say that if a block of that size is being taken over by the tenants and it's called enfranchisement, if that takes place, then there has to be a management company in place.
Yes.
They can't do it themselves.
And a highly qualified one.
Correct. They have to meet certain standards. And a lot of this is regulated now. So letting a property is highly regulated through anti-money laundering and everything else. So that, I think the same needs to happen for this.
Just out of interest, if you get, let's say, a development of several hundred units and you've got a freehold there, and at that sort of level, he's going to be a fairly sort of well-seasoned developer and maybe even a public company. But they may or may, if they decide to keep the freehold, as a lot of them do, or have done to date, are they qualified by experience, or are they going to need specifically qualified people to actually run the management of those buildings?
Well, it's the only way to keep a track on it if somebody's actually got a tangible qualification. So it wouldn't surprise me if this was brought into play, the big developers would go out and become qualified themselves or have qualified individuals.
Yeah. I do hope that happens.
Yeah.
Because I think, there are a number of developers that take, I'm not going to say negligent sort of view, but certainly a casual view about their management responsibilities. And I know things have got generally better, haven't they, David?
I think they have, and I think also a number of developers now are taking the view. I think some years ago they took the view that let's do this ourselves. It's another way to earn some money. It's another business to add on to the to the main business. But I think with the way legislation is going and the way the whole market has gone, I think they're prepared to let someone else take that headache. I think that's part of it.
I do hope so. I mean, I'm going back, I don't know, the first time I came down here, I don't know, 20, 30 years ago. I mean, it was a little bit like the Wild West, wasn't it, in those days, David?
For a number of years it was, yeah, definitely.
It was. And you've got a lot of developers who were really chancing their arm. This is the first time that there was real volume in high volume buildings, wasn't it, coming down here? And so I think it was a little bit like the Wild West, and probably not the ideal place we'd like it to be.
Perhaps a slower market will tame that a little bit. I think the fact that we're in a slow market at the moment could well tame that and make people see a little bit more sense, act more professionally.
Now, talking of slow markets and things that affect it, David, there's recently been a lot of negative publicity surrounding excessive service charges in multi-unit developments. Are developers now resisting the temptation to provide swimming pools, gyms, cinemas and the like in their designs in an effort to reduce future management costs?
Without a doubt they are.
Yeah.
Without a doubt. I've seen it continually over the past few years, and it's kind of come to a head the last 24 months that service charge, I've been saying for a little while that I think service charge is potentially the next thing that the government, if they can ever find time, will mess about with, fiddle with, find a problem with it and so on. But the reality is a building costs to run what it costs to run. And that's part of the problem, is that, I mean, we recently had an increase in the service charge where I am selling the properties, and a large chunk of that was down to staff wages, because guess what? Staff wages have to go up, plus they've had the extra NI contribution from employers, and the service charges are just going through the roof because of that an awful lot.
Yeah. I mean, certain positive things you have. Now, I'm not sure whether I'm right in saying it would be illegal as such, but I know property developers now can't, for instance, take commissions off the insurance and just put it onto the service charge. They can't earn money in that way, so everything's got to be transparent. I think that's law now.
Yeah,
So, yeah,
absolutely.
yeah. And it is very difficult. I know I sit in the middle sometimes. I try and give some advice to our sort of residents association at various times. And when you talk to people and they say, well, concierge, why don't we? Look, that's the hugest cost, but a 24-hour concierge is not one person, it's probably 4, because you need 3 on the shifts and you need a 4th for cover and holidays and that sort of thing. So the multiples are quite great, aren't they, when it comes to these things?
These buildings have become very, very difficult to run, very complicated to run. You've got big estate service charge to run the estate in generally. Staff is a huge cost, but I sit at my office is in the post room, and there's a reason for that. It's because I can see everyone coming in and out, and I can see what's going on. But I've had a look line by line through our service charges and thought, well, maybe you could save a little bit by 1 less staff. But 1 less staff isn't going to save you that much money anyway, amongst 400 flats, say.
No.
And then I watched the building run. You couldn't do with 1 less staff. It just would not run efficiently. Cleaning, insurance, window cleaning, cradles, all of this stuff. It's very, very expensive. But then again, you do have to have a look at the fact that if you own your own house, you don't pay a service charge, but you do pay your gardener and your window cleaner and your insurance. So there is you're not living for nothing.
No, you're not. But where some people do have a little bit of a problem sort of grasping the situation, it's like, I constantly hear people coming down to our concierge in the building and they say, oh, I've got a light bulb gone. Well, have you got somebody who can... Sorry, you go to wherever, you buy a light bulb and you twist it in and you do it yourself, which is what you'd have to do if you owned your own house.
Yeah.
But we're into this sort of mollycoddle sort of flat living, aren't we, in London especially, and it's quite hard for some people to actually grasp what that means. But everything does have a cost, and also any cuts you make do have often a severe consequence on the running of the building.
I suppose the positive is if you're paying that sort of money for all these facilities, you would probably want to spend more time there. So that might stop these properties becoming vacant, and you might actually struggle to let them out for numerous reasons, but one, to probably get the rental value it needs to cover everything.
Yeah, I don't think anyone's struggling to rent out in London at the minute.
Yeah.
London's really strong from a rental perspective. Lots of students as well renting London, but I wonder how the landlords afford to pay the service charge alongside it. It's so difficult.
In my building, there's so many landlords who just I can't make it pay, letting it out. I get what I consider to be a high rental, but it's still not covering what I need to be paying out. I mean, these swimming pools and things, they cost such a lot to refurbish, and we have had in the past developers who really have subsidised service charges in the first 4 or 5 years, and of course it catches up, doesn't it? And there we are. Right, well, on that happy note, we're going to end the show. So a big thank you to David Galman and Chris Barry. Thank you both very much for coming in.
Thank you.
And I'm Stephen Galpin. Join me again next time on Property Question Time.